Dearest 5, how the hell does nay one thing a clause based on English royalty have weight in the United States after 1776? What unreconstructed Tory BS is this?
So technically, I will say this about that. Technically, you can base, as long as the life is in existence at the creation of the document, it's fine. It's ridiculous. It's like weird. It's, like I said, it's very un-American. I absolutely agree with you. We got a Tea Party for a reason. But technically, if there's any life in being, you can use that. But Florida really doesn't follow that rule. So it just shows that either they're knowingly putting in some ridiculous stuff, which I think goes to WW Pro's theory of let's tie this up in court for as long as possible because we can call it an issue of first impression. We can say, oh, look at how novel this is. We get to challenge it in court. We'll appeal it, and it'll have to go all the way up to the Florida Supreme Court, which, by the way, they're going to get blown the fuck out in the Florida Supreme Court. That's going to be a slaughter for them.
You would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, they're done. They got zero chance in the Florida Supreme Court in terms of the law.
Corporation, I was going to say a corporation can't pass its own laws, which is basically what Disney did here, or tried to do.
It's not going to happen because the precedential effect this would have for homeowners associations. Because that's the thing, in court you have to worry about the precedential effect. The precedential effect this would have, because there are 1,700 special districts around Florida. All of them could turn around tomorrow and assign all of their powers to homeowners associations. And then you'd have these super powered homeowners associations, which have the power of eminent domain. So now you have HOAs that can eminent domain at free will, meaning they can just take people's property. Yeah, they got to pay them just compensation for it. But imagine these super powered, hyper strong HOAs that effectively are cities. It would be ridiculous.
And they would say Disney can do it, so we can do it.
Well, yeah, the law. If this applies to the Disney HOA, it applies to any HOA. All of them. That's how the law works.
So I spoke with the Florida attorney, and we said, okay, just come up with a realistic reason why they would put this in there. Let's pretend for a moment that it's not just ludicrous. And he said, well, the best reason I can possibly come up with is they would say, well, the monarchy has just had a new grandchild, and if you were going to look at any family in the world and assume that they would have the longest longevity, it would be the British monarchy, that perhaps they would have the longest living, children from this point forward, and so that would be Disney's claim. But it's still just stupidly ludicrous.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, yes, you could say, hey, that's the basis. Is like that we intend for the English monarchy to be to last forever, right? And they're around right now. But it's still kind of ridiculous. But once again, I don't think it's more than a laugh, because there's in this term clause, which once again I've got pulled up here, and I'll show you guys one more time. There's 3 terms. And so even if one of them is knocked out, even if this first one here is knocked out, the agreement, the declaration shall continue in perpetuity. That's one term, term 1. Term 2 is the Charles King of England. Right? That's term 2. And 3 is after this notwithstanding. So we'll terminate as of the date that none of WT Bar or its entities own real property, own land within 10 miles of Reedy Creek. Mm-hmm. So they've got 3 possible terms in here. So even if one of them is bad, the others are there. And the default under Florida law, and I'll say it for the last time, is 90 years term based on the wait and see approach. Okay, so that's the basic. They're going to have to record. They would have to record again within 30 years for the marketable title, but just based on the term alone, 90 years would be the approach.
Indeed. All right, let's grab a few more of these super chats here before we move on. John Doe, 5 British pounds. Reminder, the King of England has not existed since the 1700s. King Charles III is the King of the United Kingdom. Yeah. I don't think they were so concerned with the exactness of the language, because this entire thing that Disney did is bupkis to begin with. It is meaningless.
It's common American nomenclature, but we do recognize the need for specificity.
Yeah, absolutely. Horseradish power for 2 British pounds sterling. I'm English. Disney, leave me out of it.
They got to drag you in the middle of it with tea and crumpets and all.
Camelbot killer for 5. If Florida removes the special taxing district and forces Disney to pay off the bond. If Disney can't pay, would that force Disney to go bankrupt or sell off stuff?
The bondholders would have a lien against the property. So the bondholders would have a lien against the fucking Magic Kingdom. Can you guys imagine that for a second? That there's a lien on Spaceship Earth?
This is why I said I could not wait for this conversation.
I know. There's so much hilarity. Now, realistically, again, the state of Florida.
Sorry, I'm just losing.
I get a lien against
I know.
the Venetians. The Venetian animatronics I get a lien against.
They auction off like Fantasyland. They're like, you know what?
And the best part was you'd see the guys from Universal walking in with bidding sticks to come into the auction. It's like, hey, we'll buy some of this stuff. No, I mean, look, the state of Florida would effectively take over, like I said earlier. They could take over administration of the bond debt to make sure that municipal bond was satisfied, and then they could turn around and levy a tax. The only place under Florida state law, according to Andrew, they can levy a tax to service those bonds is within the boundaries of the properties that those bonds were originally levied against, and that is
stuck to live in those double wides.
Yep, completely owned. Every property in there is completely owned by the Walt Disney Company, so Disney still pays the debt service.
Now, wait a minute, though. So I know this is all silly because Disney's not going to allow this to happen. Florida, I don't know. Disney is really this dumb at this point. Never mind.
Disney's done some dumb stuff. Yeah, they don't underestimate them at this point.
They have really hardened their stance on all this. But if this were to all occur in the 1% chance, does it go to Disney or does it go to the residents inside the mobile homes whom Disney has put there? Who takes it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I mean, are those double wides even still there in another?
Oh, they're hauling them off right now if they're watching the stream.
Well, it doesn't. My understanding, it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, my memory from municipal bond law, which I had to do, to get my Series 7 20 years ago, but any real property inside that district, commercial or residential, is exposed.
Yes,
it's all of it.
Any private real property which was benefited by those bonds, which is subject to those bonds, upon which the bonds were levied, which I guarantee you, upon which the revenues were collected from, is subject to potential levy. Even if they're not, by the way, even if they're not attached, if they were kind of referenced. So Magic Kingdom is up in the air, Epcot's up in the air, Hollywood Studios is up in the air, the private developments, the undeveloped land is up in the air. All of it. They can
tax the damn monorails. It doesn't matter. It's all. It's everything in there is exposed. Every piece of owned real property inside that, which is entirely Disney, that's what's going to pay the bills.
They will scramble for that money and pay it off when it ever gets to push comes to shove. That's why you can tell this isn't serious, because they're just trying to kick the can as far as they can kick it, and one last little attempt at an FU on the way out the door, but it seems petulant. I also want to answer one thing, because I think some people misunderstand this. I had some of the pixie dusters on Twitter. Hilarious. They were talking about like the power of Disney legal, and Disney legal is so strong. They're not specialists in this area of law. Number one, they farm this all out of house. But Disney legal is actually fairly weak because they've been farming their work out to the lowest bidder for years. And at the end of the day, those people are just people, and they end up making mistakes, particularly when they don't know what they're doing and they don't really know special district law, because they've been operating their special district as an in-house department. They've been operating Reedy Creek like budgeting, like Disney budgeting, like it's internal. This is why they are terrified of the emails coming out. They're terrified of the records coming out. One of the things they're already in trouble for is deleting records, deleting things that should have been there in the record. The AG's already going after them for that, pursuing them for that, because that's a violation of our sunshine laws. But they had to, because it's going to be clear if you go back in the records that there was no barrier between Disney and Reedy Creek. It was completely porous. They were completely being operated pretty much out of the same. Yes, Reedy Creek has an office. They're being operated out of Disney.
Who do you think's calling the shots on this, Andrew? Where do you think this is going? Does this go to Gutierrez? Does this go all the way up to Iger? Who's calling the shots to say, let's flip off all of the Florida legislature and see what happens?
I would say this goes to Iger. I mean, it's got to. Like, all roads got to lead up, right? There's no way Iger didn't know about it at a bare minimum.
Well, somebody's really dumb. That's what you're trying to figure out. Who is it up at the top who's leading them in the wrong direction, majorly?
I mean, that's where you have to stop. I mean, the buck stops there, or at least with the knowledge, right? Because there's no way that this stuff happened without Iger's knowledge, consent, and sign off. No way. Yeah. It's too big of an FU. There's no way.
And to Camelbot's second super chat here for $5, kind of what we just answered here. What damage would happen if Florida removes their tax district? Pay the bond, Peltz restart a proxy fight, investors remove Iger and board members. I think the latter part of that, while it's certainly possible, it's not highly likely. But what happens if the Florida legislature just decides on the nuclear option and completely and utterly dissolving? Not just the dissolution except for everything but the boundaries, but just basically wreck the whole thing to the ground. They could. And that's what I was saying, where the state of Florida would effectively take over the administration of those bonds.
Yeah, those bonds
and then tax Disney. And then tax Disney to pay them.
Yeah, they're getting paid, period. Yeah. There's no way that those bonds are not getting paid.
Yeah, or tax, to be specific, they're going to tax the property, the real property that Disney owns, inside of what, in this example, would have been formerly known as the Reedy Creek Improvement District. That's it. So thank you, Camelbot Killer. Appreciate you. Russell Hall, Disney will be working to elect a friendly governor, and good luck with that. Ain't going to happen.
A Democrat in Florida? Are you fucking kidding me?
No, I mean,
that's not happening. Yeah.
Ron DeSantis just won one of the biggest landslides in Florida's history for a governor. The legislature is, 70 to 75% Republican now in both chambers. I mean, it's done, folks. That goose is cooked. They get nothing back. And this is part of Disney's frustration. I'm sure they spent a lot of money campaigning against and a lot of effort campaigning against DeSantis the last time, and they 92%. Lost their butt.
90% of Disney's political donations went in the opposite direction, so yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much, though, Russell Hall. But they still work for it. You're right. They will still work to. They're just not going to be very successful. So was RCID dissolved or not? Was some other method used to archive or achieve a similar means? Are new laws governing the district? Well, yeah, we've been talking about this. It's a great question. So as I said before, and I'll let Andrew kind of handle this one, from what we can see, everything about Reedy Creek, right down to the name, was dissolved, except for the boundaries. They basically kept the boundaries, but the 1967 legislation that formed Reedy Creek was stripped and burned, and it was replaced with a new set of rules that all fall under the new statutes that the other 1,700 special taxing districts that Andrew was talking about, they are now, that they fall under. They're now playing by those same rules. Is that about right, Andrew?
Yeah, I would say that they destroyed the old and now here comes the new. Now, when they talk about, is this a successor? Well, yeah, this will be viewed as a successor, and that's kind of the intent for the bonds, right? Is that they'll just pass from one to the successor entity, right? Sort of like, for example, if you have a company that goes, bankrupt, right? Or, and it's dissolved, and then there's an entity that pretty much takes all its assets, right? So for the purposes of any agreements or anything else, they're considered the new entity, right? Number one is dead, long live number one, everything goes to number two. So everything's moved over to the new one. So the Central Florida Oversight District is all there is right now. There is no more Reedy Creek. Reedy Creek is gone. And the new laws governing them are the laws that were set by the state of Florida, which are very similar, but include important updates like transparency, like removing the nuclear facility thing, that thing's kind of gone, and adding the accountability of having state-appointed representatives. So all that law is set at a state level. And by the way, once again, one of the new powers that was not set was the power to remove their own power. Central Florida Tourism District does not have the power to limit their own power via real covenants. And unless, as a special district, you've been granted a power, you do not have that. See, over here in Asia, we have something called positive law, which is if something is illegal, right? So, for example, if it's illegal for you to wear a unicorn horn, right? It's not illegal.
I'm up for that law, by the way.
Yeah, by the way, yeah, this is pretty good, right? It's not illegal for you to wear a narwhal horn because they didn't specifically ban that. It's that's how a lot of the legal systems work around here. If it's not specifically banned, right? They ban, let's say green apple vodka is banned. Well, birthday cake vodka is presumptively legal then. That's the way positive law works in a lot of Asia, but it's not.
You got some weird laws over there, man. What's wrong with the green apple? Never mind.
Yeah. It's not like that in Florida. With special districts, you need to specifically be given the power, or you don't have it. That's how the law works.
Renegade.